Luis has let us know that we have 3 sessions left. So what we wanted to do is check in. We've gone through the last couple of weeks on monetization and understanding the best way to create social types of games, or to work with social campaigns or social networks and these types of things. And what we wanted to do is check in with you now that we've had these very good conversations, and see what your thinking is. Where are you with regards to the game, and the targeting in terms of the audience and the types of programs you're planning on, and the technology that you're, a lot of what we talked about is very technology dependent. Mm-hmm. If the technology is not there, you can't really do it, mm-hmm. right? So we talked about the in-game advertising, or we talked about the A/B testing, a lot of these different things. So we wanted to see first where you are, and then to answer any additional questions, right. And also to give you feedback on where you are. So if that's okay for this session, we'd like to cover those things. If there are other things that you have for the agenda, questions, we'd be very happy to include those as well. Right. Does that sound okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, about the game is in the same state as 2 weeks, three weeks ago, because okay. we have to stop to develop another application.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Educational game
the
that
educational
they're doing.
game.
Right.
Okay.
But using what we discussed with you about social strategies and monetization, the next plan is to develop the social strategy for the Space Runner and develop the monetization strategies for that.
Okay.
I think with that we are good. That's enough material so we can work with. Now, as I talked to you, the first session that was with all the team, like 3 weeks ago,
yeah.
More interest we have is about game design. How we can make our game design process better, how we can have a game design process per se. So we would like to discuss about that. And there is some subject about the other topics that is about keywords, maybe some App Store optimization, and how we can choose like keywords for our games, right? So maybe we can start with keywords, and then like we can do that for this session, and the remaining sessions we can talk about game design, or how you prefer.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. We are happy to talk about that. We'd also like to reserve some time about coming into the U.S. market. That was part of the original agenda that we had. So we'd like to also talk about either the last session or maybe part of the next session about what it takes to come into the U.S. market, mm-hmm. and the typical steps. Mm-hmm. So if that's okay, we'd like to include that as well.
Okay.
We didn't get to actually show the presentation. Yeah. It was slated to be shown, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, but then we had a little bit, kind of a regrouping at the time going on. So we do need to cover.
Yeah, we do have a presentation, that we've prepared, and we'd like to go through that.
Okay.
Okay, good. So why don't we start with keywords? I think, to start with, can you maybe give us a little bit of background in terms of what you're comfortable with keywords, and what you are planning on doing, and then we can comment on that?
Okay, give me a minute. Angie? Esteban, ¿Angie estará ahí? ¿Esteban?
Aquí está.
Sí, importa que les comparta a Jordan y a Radika en lo que hemos trabajado en la parte de keywords. Lo que ella, pues en lo que se vio en ese curso de ASO y todo eso.
Ya. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Angie.
Hi, Angelica.
Angie.
Hi. So here, yeah, I'm Angie.
Hi,
Angie.
How are you?
Hi, Angie.
I'm fine. How are you?
Nice to be speaking with you. Do you understand the question that we were asking?
Okay, I just wanted to... Excuse me?
Did you want to speak in Spanish? Or?
Did you understand what we were trying to say about where you are at with your keywords at the moment? Let's try to continue.
Yeah, sure. Here we took a course for defining like the keywords for an app, right? Like the main aspects to have into account to define the keywords for an application, like an Android application or an iOS application, like the difference, the importance of the description in for Android mobile apps. So we have an idea, but we would like to know like more about that with you.
Okay.
Well, make sure they're found by the right audience.
I'll let Radhika, provide some feedback here. But all I want to say is, like in our previous discussions, we really talked heavily about the audience, and so really the key with the keywords is you want to buy keywords because you have to pay for them in most of the search engines. That are going to help you target the audience that you think is best for your game. So, but Radhika has a lot more experience, so I'll turn it over to her.
Well, it's a whole science.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are people that are very specialized in SEO and even ASO, as you mentioned, for App Store optimization. That's a new field in and of itself, and then people just dedicate a whole career to this one area. I can give you a much more general perspective from integrating that into a general marketing strategy. But as with everything else, I mean, it really starts, again, back to the target audience. So when we were just asking Juan to check in with the whole team to say where you're at with the game and what target audience is being selected, and obviously, we've been talking in the last couple of sessions about women from 18 to 24 years of age. That's the target audience you're going after. And so, really looking at, we talked from a marketing perspective of these profile attributes for this segment, right, of the market. So same thing with the keywords. The whole purpose, obviously, as you know from the course you've taken, the whole purpose of keywords and defining the right keywords is so that the right members of your target audience will find you, right? It's about being found. And so, the way you get to be found through keywords is selecting the right words that will trigger the downloads or, encourage them or invite them, attract them to downloading your game. And so, as you pointed out quite correctly, the descriptions that you provide that are going to be included on the App Store, on iOS or Google Play, on the Android side, how you describe your game, it will really sort of trigger the right people to click on something. So with the difference between, I would say, just general keyword searches on the internet for organic search versus, say, ASO, there's a bit of an advantage actually with ASO because the icon that you develop for the App Store is equally as important as the keywords that you will use to describe the app. And so very often there's a lot that is done in selecting the right kind of icon that will be used for the game, something that looks representative of your game, something that represents the brand you're trying to promote, and something that represents the kind of shiny thing that will be attractive to the right audience. So again, understanding from a marketing perspective what makes that target audience excited about games in general, and this genre of games, space runners, so it's runner games and with a space theme. So you're going to have to, from an ASO perspective, select the right kind of icon that is going to represent that brand correctly to that target audience, and then also selecting the right keywords that go along with that. And so just describing it as an exciting space runner might not be the right way to do it. So one of the things that people start with, with any analytics, is to benchmark what's being done in that genre. Look at comparable games. Look at what keywords are driving up the most traffic in that genre. Look at the bid prices of certain keywords within that genre, because obviously this is like an auction kind of a thing, right? The highest demand for that keyword will command the highest price. So you start sort of reverse engineering it, and you look at which words are commanding that high price and why are they commanding that high price. Understand the correlation, the relationship between the keyword and the target audience, and looking at the games that are within that genre that are creating a lot of buzz and attraction. And understanding the why, so that then you can be a little bit wiser, a little bit more intelligent about the keywords that you will select. So not just saying, well, we're going to select some words and we think it's going to be the best one for this genre or for this target audience. You really want to be a little bit more intelligent, saying, well, obviously if you're going to do a pay-per-click kind of campaign using these keywords, you want to make sure that your limited marketing dollars are going to be wisely spent on those keyword searches. They can be extremely effective. They can trigger the right types of downloads, the qualified leads that come to you through the App Store or Google Play to your game. But the two sort of have to meet in the middle. So there's all that organic work that you can do with community building, and all of that is extremely effective and very powerful, because that also brings you qualified leads to your game. But then having on the opposite side a much more thoughtful strategy on finding the right keywords and looking at the analytics behind it and saying which ones are popping up. Does the word space pop up? Does the word space adventure pop up? Does the word runner pop up? And how many of those instances pop up with the highest amount of relevance and clicks? Understanding the benchmarking behind that is probably the first place that I would recommend starting. And then from that, then you can come up with the right strategy. So not just diving in and saying, oh, okay, we're going to purchase the Space Runner, and hopefully that'll work, because that's what our game is. And it is what your game is. But maybe there's a different way to express it. Maybe it's pets. Maybe it's collect pets. Maybe it's something else that has to do with the mechanics of the game that ordinarily you wouldn't think about, and saying, oh yeah, right, there is a bit of that in the game, but that's the one that attracts the highest amount of qualified leads to download your app. So that's kind of, in general, very, very broad terms, how I would go about it. Any questions or any thoughts about that? Hello, Angie?
Angie?
Oh, they're on mute.
Oh, they're on mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Angie?
Hello. Yeah, here I am.
Si tienes preguntas.
No. We used a tool. It's called Searchman.
Okay.
It's like for
Searchman.
Yeah, it's very useful to see like the odds that people look for this keyword. So if keyword has like a high probability to be looked for the people, so it's a good keyword. And another tools, but that was the.
Sorry.
Excuse me?
Please finish what you were saying. I lost you.
Like our connection is like really slow, so we are having like problems here.
So you used Searchman as a tool to look at which keywords had the highest, search relevance for your game. And what did you find as when you used that tool? What kinds of words in this genre of space runners did you find have the greatest relevance?
Okay, no, we did it for another application, for Crazy Shots.
I see. For Crazy Shots.
Crazy.
Yeah, and with that tool, you can search for the competitors and the keywords that they use.
Yeah, that's just what.
So you can compare. And yeah.
Okay.
And are you planning to do that also for Space Runner?
Excuse me?
Just wondering.
Oh, we haven't.
You haven't, but you're planning.
But you're planning on using it.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I would definitely start exactly. Yeah. You're on the right track.
Definitely.
And you're going about it the right way. So absolutely, looking at the competitive landscape in that keyword search sort of area, and looking at which ones are having the highest amount of relevance and which ones are bid on the most, and understanding those correlations will be exactly the right way to go about it.
Yeah. One thing to remember, and we've kind of stressed this before, I just want to say it again because people forget, is it's very easy to focus on each stage, each step. First step is you're trying to get users, then you have users, then you're thinking about retention, then you're thinking about engagement, then you're thinking about monetization. If you kind of take it in that path of doing one at a time, then what happens is your users have a very short attention span.
Yes.
And so you lose them before you can retain them.
Yeah.
And then you can't engage them because they've already left, and then you can't monetize them because there's no one left. So it's important with any of these campaigns that you do, when you put them in place, is that you have to have all parts of your approach to getting users, retaining them, engaging them, working at the same time.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. So there was a friend of mine. He launched a game, and it was very successful in the first day. First day, he put the game out. It got 20,000 users almost instantly.
Wow.
And then the next day, it went up to like 60,000. So it was really climbing. But then his server was hit by a hack attack.
Oh no!
And it's taken offline. He scrambled around. In 24 hours, he got his server back online, but his community had dwindled to about 5,000 users. So 55,000 users quit, right, in that time. But he had already spent all of his money up front in order to get the users, and he was planning on engaging them. He didn't put in place any kind of security for his servers, and he was using a very inexpensive, cloud solution provider, and basically it turned into a money-losing proposition, and he lost all of his money, on the game, from the development all the way through, because he no longer had the money to get new users. So it's very important to think about all aspects. I'm not saying that you're going to get hacked, but the thing is time is your enemy in this process, and any time that the user is not being engaged, is not being retained, is a chance for them to leave and get, there's so many games out there.
Absolutely.
Right? There's so many different things for them to do, and so you really need to be thinking about how do you engage these users, how do you make sure, like in your A/B testing, that all these users you're paying for, keep in mind, again, with like a runner, you're going to lose about 60% of the users on the first day. And that's actually good, right?
Yep.
Some games you're losing 80%, on the first day. There's one game that we've told you about, which is this game that has 29 million downloads, they lose 80%, 85% of their users on day one.
Yeah.
And and they know why. They know they're losing them primarily on Android because the game doesn't play well on Android. They just don't have the money to maintain it. But they have so many people joining in their case that they really don't care that much. They're like, it's okay, we're getting 30 to 40,000 new users a day. Even if we lose 85%, we still have, you know, hundreds of thousands of people that are playing the game, and there's more people joining than are, you know, being lost. So they have a positive retention rate. So, you know, when you plan on launching the game, you really need to think about the whole value chain. You need to look at your budget, which is always limited, and realize that if anything goes wrong, you may not have the money to prop the game back up. And so you have to have a lot of techniques in place that we've discussed previously that can work with these initial users, not only to retain them, but to get them excited about getting you new users, right? And figuring out how to, you know, work off organic growth and non-paid, non-paid approaches that are going to enable you to build out the community inexpensively.
You know, as I mentioned in the last time when we were talking about advertising and we were talking about, say, Facebook advertising or whatever, where the cost of, you know, the per ad is just so high, you know, for a young company starting out, all of these paid searches and paid advertising techniques and so on, certainly they're very important to be educated. You know, the whole team should be educated about the various strategies that are available, the avenues that are available, the channels that are available, but to really be aware of, you know, all of the other things that you don't have to pay for, like building a community, like building a strong, you know, design and mechanics into the game to really maximize the retention within the game, make it engaging. All of these are things that you have full control over, and I would say have perhaps greater importance than the whole advertising and keyword searches and so on. A lot of that is, you know, it's kind of like, think about it as a business. You know, if you spend all of your effort and your resources and your time and your money on making flyers to say, hey, come to our store, we're opening up a brand new store and we want you to shop here. But then when they get to the shop, there's nothing to keep the customers there.
Right.
The customers have a disappointing experience and they leave. They'll never come back. All that money that you spent to promote the launch of your store and to invite people to attend and make it really exciting and lure people is not well spent, because if they can't stay and they shop, then what good was all of that front end work?
Right.
So all of the front end work, as I call it, the promotional aspect of marketing, I think becomes very important, perhaps more important and more valuable and more impactful once you have a loyal base that's coming to you. And so in my opinion, and I think Jordan probably agrees with this, spend your time more wisely thinking about the right game design, the right game mechanics, the right in-app experience that you have. It's a whole experience, user experience and user engagement within the game itself, and make that as strong as you possibly can from a technical perspective, so that, you know, you build that community, then leverage, you know, inexpensive or no expense mechanisms of organic community building through social media channels to keep the engagement strong and keep your content very strong. And then once you've got this loyal base, now you can really turn on that promotional engine to say, yes, we have a way to monetize the community, we have a way to monetize within the game, and now we can use some of that monetization towards the front-end promotional aspect, which is the keyword searches, SEO, ASO, as well as paid searches, paid advertising, for example, techniques that you might be going even further down the line. And so that becomes a really massive engine. If you look at some of the more successful games and how they started out, they really did not get too fancy with any of those promotional techniques until much later, after they had already built out the brand. You know, you didn't see Angry Bird advertising, or you didn't see all of that mechanism in place until it already was a brand that had a loyal base to it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and we've talked before about the ladder, right? And then the trampoline where you can jump up. That is very expensive to do the trampoline. If you are a funded startup, say you are able to raise $3 million and you're able to put $1 million towards the game and do, say, $50,000 a month in paid, or say the first month 100,000 and 100,000 the next month and 100,000 the following month, and then scale down to 50. If you have that, you can do trampoline.
Absolutely.
But if you're on a much leaner budget, then you really, you have to do more of a guerrilla marketing campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what everyone says is it really relies more on just having a great game. And
yes.
If you focus on having a great game, then that's going to attract people. It's going to retain people. But then beyond the great game, you need a lot of different techniques that are going to, keep the people engaged. And that has to do with how quickly you turn over the content and how interesting the store is, and how often you come up with new additions and how social it is and all these other things that we've talked about. But having a great game at the core, and this gets into the game design and the game mechanic, and also the characters that you have, and how the characters interact with the player, and how the players interact with each other, and all of those different things. Those are really critical, to getting that initial community and growing that initial community.
And then, all the while reminding yourself on staying true to your target audience. Don't do anything to jeopardize that target audience, and because it's easier said than done. People can talk about, finding the right target segment and then building everything that is relevant to that. That's very easy to say, but very difficult to actually do and execute, in real time. So, every single technique that we've talked about, every single possible strategy that is available to you, the number one word in front of everything is relevance. Relevance to your target audience. Always think back before you launch any initiative, or as you're evaluating various initiatives, think about what has the highest degree of relevance to your target market and stay true to that compass, right? And once you're really sticking true to that compass, all of these things start building a critical mass, and all of these things are integrated. That's why it's called integrated marketing, right? Because not any one thing is in isolation. Your Facebook campaign, your social media campaigns in general, your website traffic generating kind of content, your game design and your in-app experience, all of that is integrated together to form an integrated strategy, and that's what's far more powerful than any one thing by itself, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's key.
And that's what Jordan was talking about, think about that entire value chain, and really address and build that great game for that target audience.
Yeah. And the idea that you can just buy users, and that's going to be the way you get your game to be successful.
Yeah.
It's not possible on a limited budget, right? It's too expensive today to do that. The only companies that are doing that are the biggest companies.
They are, and they have the resources to do this. If you look at them as a case study, and you look at what they did in the early days when no one knew about them, you will find that they probably use much more guerrilla marketing techniques to really build up that community and build that great game, period, and then go out and then say, oh, okay, now we have some resources available to us. We can now do much more sophisticated types of promotional marketing that actually is pretty expensive.
And there's some other things that we can talk about, but before we get into that, what we'd like to do is just get feedback from you.
Yes.
Okay, let me first, I will forward this to the team. I will explain to them what you just said.
Great, thank you, Juan.
Okay. Bueno, chicos, pues primero empezamos hablando de toda la parte de las keywords. Básicamente, pues teníamos un interés especial en saber cómo va a ser toda esta parte de estrategias para posicionar la aplicación con base en las palabras clave. Ellos nos dicen, pues cosas que, por ejemplo, Angie, que había hecho un curso, ya lo sabía. Entonces, que los keywords se deben escoger con base en la audiencia objetivo del juego, que hay que buscar cuáles son las palabras clave más utilizadas en juegos similares y en base al género, utilizar herramientas. Nosotros ya tenemos varias, usamos Searchman, usamos App Annie. Yo encontré hace poco unas que se llama Axio.net, AppCrawler, Sensor Tower. O sea, digamos que hay varias herramientas disponibles para encontrar cuáles son como las mejores palabras clave. Pues en base a eso, por supuesto, una buena palabra pues costará más, pero pues en base a esto pues se puede construir toda una buena estrategia pues, de ASO y de SEO. Luego pues ellos empiezan a decirnos pues que si bien pues estas estrategias son importantes, al igual que el marketing, nosotros lo que debemos es centrarnos en hacer un buen juego, en hacer un juego que enganche, en hacer un juego que ofrezca una experiencia, que sea relevante para las personas. Si no hacemos ese tipo de juego, pues por más de que invertamos dinero en SEO, en ASO, en marketing, en campañas, pues no vamos a lograr el enganche. Recomiendan que para un estudio como el nuestro, pensemos más en la estrategia de la escalera, o sea, que es ir construyendo la comunidad y los usuarios poco a poco. Que esta estrategia del trampolín, donde uno consigue una inversión y puede gastar mucho dinero de una vez en marketing y saltar de tener, no sé, 100 usuarios a tener 1.000.000 en un mes, pues es una estrategia que funciona bien para estudios gigantes tipo, no sé, King, Rovio, EA, cosas de ese estilo, incluso Gameloft. Para nosotros, que somos un estudio pequeño, un estudio independiente, que todavía no hemos tenido ni un éxito, ¿sí? Y que pues hasta el día de hoy no tenemos tampoco un inversionista, esta estrategia de ir construyendo poco a poco nuestra comunidad con un juego bueno, con un juego que enganche, que a la gente le guste estar en el juego, que se pueda construir una comunidad, pues podemos ir empezando a crear esa base de usuarios, crear una lealtad, ¿sí? O sea, como eso también hablan ellos, y tener una lealtad con o sea, que los usuarios creen como esa lealtad y que nosotros los tengamos ahí, ofreciéndoles una buena experiencia de juego. Que teniendo eso, pues ya todos los demás son adiciones, que si bien son importantes, pues o sea, llegan es como a soportar el juego. No podemos pensar en hacer un mal juego y meterle mucha plata porque igual eso tampoco va a funcionar. Entonces, pues, digamos que hace días habíamos tenido nosotros esa discusión de tal vez como un poco desmotivadora, diciendo como que no, pero es que para ser exitoso la única opción es tener mucho dinero, solo si conseguimos un inversionista. Pues lo que ellos nos dicen ahorita es, no, si ustedes tienen un muy buen producto y son capaces de empezar a hacer como a crecer esa comunidad como de forma paulatina, pues pueden llegar a tener algo muy bueno. Nos recomiendan mucho el marketing de guerrillas, entonces pues ver cómo podemos empezar a aplicar eso para todas nuestras aplicaciones. Okay, Jordan, Raika.
Okay, yeah, great. That was great.
Is there any feedback on that?
Yeah, any questions and yeah, what does the team think about that?
Chicos, ¿tienen alguna pregunta?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I would like to know what are the tools that you use to define the keywords?
I don't know. Actually, I haven't done any.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I do. Are we on mute? I don't think so. Right?
Yeah, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Actually, I have not done any keyword analytics on mobile apps and games. I mean, Google Analytics in general, on the website is usually a great place to start. Flurry, I think, still has a good source as far as social analytics, but I personally have not done any SEO on games. I mean, that's not an area of expertise. That I told you, this area is very, very specialized these days. So, but I can certainly investigate, by the time of our next meeting and see what other options and make a notation of that.
Yeah, we'd be happy to look into that and see what people are using today. In the past, people weren't really using tools. They were just doing the research themselves. There are a lot more tools that are available these days.
Yeah.
And so it's very important to, kind of go out and look and see what people are using now. One person does. Luis, is your team using any tools in this area? If Luis is still available.
Luis?
Are you there, Luis? He may have had to step away. Okay, we can ask him when he comes back.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll do a little bit of research in that area, and we can get back to you on that topic.
Okay, thank you.
We
have problems with the connections, with the connection in the office. So if they sometimes don't respond, it's because the internet is really slow today.
Yeah, okay. And Angie was mentioning.
Oops. Yes.
So yeah, Angie was talking about a slight delay or lag in the internet on their side. So we'll be aware of that. So in terms of other...
What about this other point that I wanted to...
Yeah, I think Jordan had a point that he wanted to make as far as market entries.
So, something before... So if we look at the process, and we look at... I guess the team is maybe logging in again?
Yes, it appears twice.
Yeah. So...
I hear Skype.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, I thought it was the thing.
Yeah, Luis said, hi, did you need me?
Oh, yeah.
Luis, are you there?
Yes.
Luis.
Hi, Luis.
Yeah, we were wondering if the question came up, and you're very active, right, in evaluating what's going on with your runner, and so it's very relevant to this conversation in terms of keywords. And I don't know if you're buying keywords specifically for Drive Me Bananas or any of the other games that you've got. But the question came up from Angie, is there a particular tool or a particular set of products that you're working with that allow you to quickly identify the best keywords and maybe the most efficient approach to promoting your game? Or are you doing it?
Yes, we actually use Searchman to get the keywords.
So same one.
Same one then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that, from your experience, is that the best one that's available today?
Yeah. From what we have seen, that's the best one. You can always buy more from them, and they give you some credits. And then you also, from Searchman, you can also see how the words you're using are doing. So I think that's pretty good.
I see.
Excellent.
Okay.
So Angie, and it looks like whatever you're already using is what's recommended right now.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technology is always changing. Every 3 months, it basically needs to be reevaluated, especially in the newer areas. For things that have been around for a while, there are certain key platforms or approaches, like maybe in analytics or using Kissmetrics or something like that. There become certain leaders specifically for gaming. Rather than using maybe something like Google Analytics, which is more general.
More general.
But the important thing is really to evaluate your platform and then look at 2 or 3 different products at that time. But we can, if you have other questions about other tools, we're happy to provide you with recommendations. But it's hard to say that there's always going to be one best one. There may be 2 or 3 that you should evaluate. We wanted to also go before the keyword search as well and start talking a bit. This kind of bleeds over into game design, but it's more the process of being able to launch successfully. The typical approach that a lot of companies have taken is they create a game, they kind of play it in the office, maybe they ask some people outside the office to play it in a closed beta, and then they go and they come up with a big campaign, they buy a whole bunch of words, they launch, and maybe they're thinking about, retention, maybe they're not, maybe they're thinking about engagement. The ones that are more sophisticated are, but they basically put everything on the line. They might hold a little bit in reserve, right, so that if something goes wrong, they can backfill, or if things go really well, they can try to accelerate. So that's kind of a typical strategy that a lot of companies have used, but something that the more successful companies have been doing, and I don't know if you have enough budget for this, but we've talked about the A/B testing, we've talked about some companies will have multiple games, multiple versions of the same game with slightly different themes or slightly different approaches, each one that has been successful within their office and within a closed beta environment. So it all comes down to how many versions of the game you can make. Can you make 2, for example? And then, or can you reskin the game? And then the idea is, and they do this at Supercell, for example. At Supercell, what they do is they have an internal set of teams. So rather than having one team working on one game, they might have small groups of 3 or 4 or 5 people that get excited about a particular idea. They build it out to a prototype, and they bring it to a central committee. And the central committee makes a decision to either kill that game or to fund it and move it to the next level. And then if it gets to the next level, then they go into a closed beta. But they don't then go and launch it. What they do first is they pick a market like the market where they want to launch to. So say most companies want to launch into the US market because it's the biggest. I mean, you could also launch into Asia, but Asia you have to have very specific channels, and it's very difficult to get traction as a non-Asian player going into Asia. But the idea is, say you're interested in the US market, what you might do is you launch in Canada. And so you'd say, well, if you're interested in the US, why am I launching in Canada?
Yeah.
And the reason for launching in Canada to start is because Canada is cheaper. You know, it's not as, there's very many fewer people, like 25 million people in Canada. It's a lot less demand. And so buying keywords, getting users is a lot less expensive than buying the same number of users in the US market. The Canadian user is close enough to the US user that that if people in Canada like it, there's a really high probability that this game will also be successful in the US. So you can also go maybe to Australia, you can go to New Zealand, you can go to other countries that have a similar kind of
taste level and
preference to your target market, but do it less expensively. Also, if the game fails, say it doesn't do well, you can shut the game down and nobody really cares, right? Because you're not in the US market. And then, because if you are trying to launch and you launch and it doesn't succeed,
people know about it.
People know about it. There's going to be some kind of a press trail, especially if you did a campaign launch. You're going to go and you're going to go out to all the game press and you're going to try to get everybody to cover you. And then, you know, the game gets really bad reviews and then it fails.
That can be dangerous.
You know, now your whole brand is basically
eroded.
And you have to fight even harder the next time. They'll say, oh, is this game going to be like that last one that didn't do well? And you're making your life harder. So by going into this side market, if the game doesn't do well there, nobody knows. And if the Canadians don't like you, well, so what? It's a tiny market.
It's not a major market of the world, right? So, but it is a good. You raise a good point because it's similar enough demographically to the U.S. so that it is a very effective test market for the game to see if that kind of game would be successful in a similar market or not.
And maybe you find that people in Canada, you know, you get a few thousand users or you get 10,000 users, because you could do the same in Colombia. But the problem is that Colombian users are probably really different from U.S. users. So
culturally, they're different.
So it could be a massive hit, you know, in Colombia, and then come to the U.S. and not succeed. And I'll give you some examples of that. There are plenty of games that are over in Asia, Puzzles and Dragons, and there's at the very beginning, there was a game called Legend, which was sort of the key game in Asia for massively multiplayer online games. and they tried multiple times to enter the U.S. market, and every time they would fail. And again, it's because the game mechanic and the approach and the characters and the cultural fit wasn't for here. And even though they were the most successful game in the world at the time, they could not get into the U.S. market. Gamers would look at it and they'd be like, I don't want to play that. So it's very important to make sure that your game is very similar in terms of the target market, is giving you the signals. And maybe the Canadians tell you, hey, this is a great game, but you know, these pets, they should be purple and green, not red and blue. And then, you know, you take that on board, and it's like, wow, okay, I'm glad that the Canadians told us that. We now launch in the U.S., and like, it's a wild success because they don't like blue and red pets, but they like, you know, purple and green. So that's the thing. Is sometimes you just have to tweak.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to fail the game. Sometimes you have to pivot it. Sometimes you have to put on a different theme. But this is an inexpensive way to test out the game.
The risk level is less of, so even if you do fail, it's not a huge risk of failure. The failure is actually you know, it'll be forgotten quickly or whatever because nobody's paying attention to the Canadian market.
And it's not only you know, foreign companies coming into the U.S. market that do this.
It's U.S. companies that do it
too.
They test market over.
They test market it in a cheaper market, and it's for this whole reason that when you're buying users, it's expensive, right? And it taxes everybody. And if you're a Zynga, you don't care about a couple thousand users in the U.S. market. But again, if you do anything in the U.S. market, everybody knows, right? You go to Canada, it's
less tracked.
You know, it's you put it in stealth, you put it under like a shell company under you, you come out with this game, and nobody really knows it's Zynga, right? It's some little stealth studio inside Zynga. They put a different name on it, and they can kind of keep it hidden. And if it's successful, then they can bring it back in. So that's the thing is don't just think about getting keywords in Colombia. Don't just think about keywords in the U.S. Think about getting keywords in
adjacent
market that, you know, you can launch into and test it in that market. And the really cool thing is, you know, you can go to the app stores in Canada and set up an account and, you know, go through the whole process and launch. And it's probably going to be even easier than doing it in the
effective.
US. So something to keep in mind. Any questions about that?
Maybe just to complement that, in June, the end of June, we were on Barcelona in a developers conference, and they talked about how to launch a game. And they talked about the soft launch. They said it has to last like 2 months in a different country.
Exactly.
You evaluate metrics, and you see the data, and you decide, do I want to go further with this game? Maybe you can use that to change the game. Maybe the mechanics aren't working, so you change it and try again. They also say that you can validate your ideas with crowdfunding services. So you try to put your idea, and if it gets a lot of attention and a lot of money, so maybe it's a good idea. That's very important. I talk with this with the team.
Wonderful.
Chicos, ahorita lo que estábamos hablando era de la parte de cómo lanzar el juego. O sea, cómo debe ser una estrategia correcta para lanzar el juego. Entonces ellos hablan de que en estudios muy grandes, por ejemplo en Supercell, lo que ellos tienen es como grupos pequeños de gente que están desarrollando prototipos, ideas que surgen así como, no sé, Eduardo, Germán, Esteban, Angélica, Patricia, cualquiera tiene una idea, arman un grupo pequeño de gente, la llevan a prototipo, luego un comité central decide si esa idea o la rechazan o la van a probar. Y al momento de probarlas, ellos no le hacen de una vez toda una campaña de mercadeo pues grande y de mucho dinero, sino que lo que hacen es buscar un país similar al país objetivo. Entonces, digamos, si vamos a lanzar nosotros, queremos ir con fuerte al mercado norteamericano, pues buscamos un país similar. Entonces ellos dicen similares, ¿cuáles podrían ser? Canadá, por ejemplo. Entonces, si vamos a lanzar en Estados Unidos, podemos coger Canadá como nuestro campo de pruebas. Entonces, hacemos una campaña de lanzamiento en Canadá con alguna empresa que podamos contactar allá, que nos ayude a distribuir, invertimos poco dinero y podemos obtener alguna base de usuarios. Es más barato también en lanzar, por ejemplo, en Canadá o en Australia. Podemos medir datos, un mes, 2 meses, medir datos de cómo está comportándose el juego en ese momento y hacer las mejoras correspondientes si es que hay que hacerlas. Si no, si vemos que de verdad el juego está siendo un éxito en ese país que cogimos como campo de pruebas, entonces podemos proceder a hacer el lanzamiento en el país oficial ya con el dinero y con campañas de marketing más agresivas. Esto pues se llama soft launch, o sea, como un lanzamiento suave. Es una cosa donde uno puede dedicar 1 mes o 2 meses para hacer todas esas pruebas. Es importantísimo en esta parte todas las métricas analíticas y utilizar pues por supuesto para mejorar el juego. Entonces eso era de lo que nos estaban hablando ellos. ¿Alguna pregunta? ¿Muchachos?
¿Aló?
¿Alguna pregunta?
Sí.
No. ¿Alguna pregunta?
No.
¿Sí están escuchando?
Sí.
Ah, bueno, perfecto.
Pero es que a veces se entrecorta porque la red está muy mal.
Ah, sí, hoy ha estado tenaz.
Pero sí escuchamos.
¿Pero lo entendieron?
Sí. Sí, sigamos.
Okay, we can continue. Jordan, Radhika?
Okay. There's just one more point along these lines, which I have some experience with. So I just wanted to bring it up. So one of the companies that I worked with for about 18 months, what we were focused on is we were focused on bringing games from outside of the U.S. and localizing them for the U.S. market. And we were primarily looking at the Asian market. And what helped us in understanding if these games, like if you pick the wrong game and you bring it into the U.S. market, it can be a failure, right? Exactly. It's the same thing. So what we were doing is we came down with a methodology. It was like a 50-point checklist of what the game had to have in order to be successful in the U.S. But as part of that 50-point checklist, what we said is the game had to have launched in the UK and Germany, and we had to have certain metrics in those 2 countries to have any chance for it to be successful in the US. So we used that. But something to keep in mind is, you've talked about, and we talked about the soft launch concept. Another thing that you can do is, let's say that you look at the US market and you don't see a space runner, right? There's no space runners. Or there's runners, but they're too different, right? They don't have pets, or there's no adventure component. Well, you don't have to limit yourself just to the US in terms of looking at comparables, right? And using, say, Searchman for just the US market. If you look at the Canadian market again, or maybe the Australian, or the New Zealand, or the UK market, or even Germany, right? You can look out at those markets, and there's going to be different games in those markets. And maybe in those markets, you find something that's more similar, and then you look and see how that did, right? And so that gives you a wider look, because sometimes you go out with a particular game, and there's nothing like it at all, and you're kind of clueless. Yeah. How is this going to do? Is this going to be successful? And there's a big question mark, and you have very limited budget. You have no idea if it's going to be successful. That's very risky, right? So what you can do is you can look across to more countries and hopefully find something. If you widen the net like that, you still don't find something, well, there's still very high risk. And so you want to do things that are going to moderate the risk and are going to allow you to, like we've talked about before, stretch your money, farther. Any questions on that?
No, that's really no questions. I just want to mention that that's a really interesting idea.
Okay.
We know a company. It's called Native Prime. It works on localizing. They talk with us and they say, like, you have your game target for Colombia, so we can localize it for America,
Yeah.
It's primarily a translation service, but looking at that text, voices, everything that you can, like maybe there is words that the translating is right, but maybe if you can locating it, the context maybe is different. They offer that service for all the world.
Exactly.
We knew that. We talked with that company. They offer based on number of words to translate and the audios. It's a really interesting, and about how to take, like, this game is being successful in Japan, how we can make it successful here in Colombia. That's very, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's something very important to realize, is that the keywords in one country may have nothing to do with the keywords in a different country. So maybe you have 3 keywords or 10 keywords in Colombia that make your game very successful. But you could just translate those words, localize them, bring them into the US market, and there's nothing at all, because it's not just the words, it's the culture, right? And it's also the target audience. And the target audience, you know, in Colombia might be, again, it could be based off of a celebrity, but then you don't have a celebrity in the US.
Exactly.
And so that celebrity may not be popular in the US. And so if you try to use those same words, right, in the US market, nobody will. I mean, there may be some people that will follow, but it's going to be a much smaller market.
Well, hence the brand value of that celebrity. You know, not having to be a regional celebrity, but more so an international. So the multinational global approach is very different from just the regional local market. And so what's very well known in the regional local market in Colombia is going to be extremely different from somebody like Shakira. Now that's a different brand altogether. She has a global multinational brand. Everybody knows about her, including here or anywhere else, right? So using her as a celebrity is very different from somebody that is very common and popular in the local market.
Like the
or Yuya, for example. She may be great in Mexico and Central America, Latin America, but then she's completely unknown here. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know anything about her, but those are things to think about, and saying, making sure that whatever celebrity brand you happen to align yourself with is really a multinational brand rather than a local brand.
Or you may have to have different celebrities in different countries, or whatever.
That's part of the localization process, too, you know.
And so what Native Prime brought up, now where is this company located, the localization company? That
I meet with them in Spain, but I'm not sure where are they from.
Okay. But it's called Native Prime?
Native Prime, yes.
Okay. Because I know a lot of companies in the localization space, and we could potentially make some recommendations there as well.
Okay, that would be nice.
Because if you met them in Spain, they may be very good for Europe, but they may not know the U.S. market. I guess they told you that they have done things in the U.S. market before?
They take their like this transnational company. They had offices around the world, but I didn't ask too much about where they were, but the services they provided.
Okay. And it was primarily for gaming companies, or it was for any kind of company?
The event was about games, so I guess it's about gaming. Yes, it's.
That's good.
The slogan was something like making global games local, something like that.
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
Yeah, that's good. We work a lot in the whole globalization area, and localization is part of globalization. So we have contacts and experience there. We can look into Native Prime and give you some feedback on it.
Okay.
But you know, it's kind of easy to set up an office here in the U.S. and claim you have a U.S. office. But you know, again, maybe they do have a lot of stuff. I haven't heard of that company, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not big in the game.
Well, we can ask around.
We can help. We can receive your recommendations.
Yeah, we're happy to provide you.
We're trying to learn which are the best options. So right now, that's the only one we have. It's always nice to have.
Well, we can ask for some reference points on them and see if we can get some insight into whether they're really good at what they do as what they're claiming to do.
Yeah, let me just take a quick look at them. And Native Prime.
Yep,
Yeah, making global games local. Global and local, portfolio. Wow, Avatar. That's pretty good.
Yeah, they have some powerful clients like Rovio.
Yeah.
Pro Cycling Manager. Blood Bowl. This is for. Well, let me take a look. If any of these.
Pro Cycling Manager.
iPhone, iPod, iTouch, iPad. Okay, so the first two here are mobile titles.
Mm-hmm.
Fallout New Vegas. Looks like they do pretty big. Yeah, these are all very well-known titles, so they look quite good.
Yeah, CSI.
Splinter Cell.
Mm-hmm.
Warhammer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they may charge a lot.
These people
they
look like they play with heavyweights, but they don't come cheap, I'm sure.
1.1 million words.
Yeah.
So this is so yeah, they obviously have a good portfolio. The thing though is they may be very expensive.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah, and in terms of their locations, global and local. Let's see.
Yeah, they're basically European.
Yeah, they don't have a U.S. operation.
2 locations in Madrid.
Yeah,
Bologna.
Basically Spain.
Yeah, you can ask Fabio about the Bologna.
Yeah. Okay. This is good. We know some other companies, and so
we can get some
give you some
other suggestions as well in case these guys look good. It's just that I'm wondering whether they might be too expensive.
Yeah.
Everything comes for a price.
Yeah. These look much more high end.
Yeah.
Did they give you a quote for cost per word from Spanish to English?
No, they told me something. I showed them one of our games, and they say, okay, for this it will be like, I don't know, something like 40 euros, but I can't remember.
40,000 euros?
No, 40 euros.
40?
40, yes. 40.
For the whole game?
Yes.
Maybe there's not too many words.
It has very few texts.
Ah, right.
Oh, okay.
To the text-based word.
Yeah, I don't think they would take on that kind of business, though. They don't look like,
they don't know 40. That they do. Do they do really small clients?
Conference, and they offer their services to a lot of indie companies.
Okay. All right. Maybe they're trying to build a brand in the indies.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see. They're using the crowdsourcing?
Yeah.
Is that what they do?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Game scripts and history. That's okay.
Yeah, so they do adaptation. Yeah, they look good. They look like a good company. And
we can ask around.
Yeah, we can definitely ask around.
Excuse me, Veronica, Jordan?
Yes.
It's German here. I have a little question, but I have to do that question in Spanish. Can you help me?
Sí.
Germán, si quieres hacerlo en español, yo la traduzco, eso no hay problema.
Listo. Lo que estaban ahorita hablando de Price, ¿cierto?
¿De qué?
Sobre Price, sobre los artes de concepto y el trabajo de los artistas de concepto.
No, estábamos hablando de Native Prime, de precio.
Ya. Vale, pero entonces, de todas maneras me surgió una pregunta, y es más o menos si ellos saben o conocen cuánto suelen pagar las empresas a los artistas de concepto allá en California.
Ok.
Sí, pues tal vez, no sé, estaba como salía del tono, pero pues, salía del tema, pero me hicieron recordar que quería preguntarles eso la otra vez.
Ok, yo les pregunto.
Vale.
Okay. So Herman was asking how much is the salary for concept artists for games in the US.
The salary
yes.
for a concept artist?
Yes.
Well, it matters what kind of games they're working on. If they're working on mobile, if they're in a big company, if they're an indie studio, if they're doing console games, it all varies, pretty wide range. What kind of company and what kind of platform?
Okay. Germán, ¿qué tipo de empresa, qué tipo de plataforma? No sé, móviles, no sé, consolas, web.
Móviles.
Mobile platforms. Like for mobile, I don't know, medium size studio.
Yeah.
He probably would have a pulse on that.
There's a number of different surveys to kind of get it now. And this would be for senior, for mid-level, or junior person.
Junior.
Junior. Medium.
¿Cómo se dice? ¿Milla?
Promedio.
Sí, que en medio. El de la mitad.
What? What? Excuse me, I received a call. Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Excuse me, I received a phone call, so I have to...
Oh, you received a phone call, so you have to step away?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We probably need to close out the session as well.
Okay.
So we'll just look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow, because our next session is tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So good speaking with you all. We'll answer the question tomorrow.
We'll answer the question tomorrow. We'll do some research on on Native Prime as well, and maybe have some feedback for you on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Good speaking with you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Entonces, Germán creyó que estábamos hablando de Price.
Sí, sí, pero fue porque escuché mal inglés, no sé.
No, estaban hablando era del precio de las traducciones.
Angie, si me hicieran saltar el juego, me necesitas porque yo no me informe diferente. Te voy a compartir el documento.
¿Cómo así?
Acá me dicen que...
¿Mañana qué hora es?
Sí.
Mañana está a la... Espera.
¿Cómo?
A las 8. Mañana a las 2 de la tarde.
Dice personajes, escenarios y museos.
Pues, aquí está programado que a las 2.
Pero no está incluido como bocetos.
Sí, ¿no?
Bueno, entonces, ¿ya colgamos?
Sí, ya no hablamos.
Bueno, ya nos vemos mañana.
Chao, que estén bien.
Bueno, chao.
¿Esta la escribiste ya en la plataforma?
Sí, pero tú te preguntabas, te llegó un correo.